While working Americans catch up, we're going to put a temporary cap on credit card interest rates at 10%.
Credit card companies say the 10% cap would be, quote, unworkable.
The number of accounts with delinquent balances has more than doubled since 2021. Over half of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $1,000 emergency expense.
Despite that short-term pain in terms of, pressure at the grocery store and pressure on oil and these other things that Americans spend money on, benefited the wealthiest Americans.
A new bipartisan bill is aimed at giving consumers a break when it comes to credit card interest rates, capping them at 10%. Fox Business reporter Jeff Flock has the story.
If you're headed out to the mall with your credit card, you might be cheered to hear that Republicans and Democrats have apparently found common ground on the subject of credit card interest rates. Senators Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley co-sponsoring a bill that would cap credit card interest at 10%. Senator Sanders saying America's now being ripped off by credit card companies with interest rates so high that they amount to loan sharking and extortion. The conservative Josh Hawley from Missouri saying it's not just wrong to raise interest rates, but it's exploitative of consumers. The current average interest rate on credit cards, 21.47%.
Do y'all see this?
21.7%, although some suggest it could be even higher. This is a notion, the capping at 10%, that even President Trump supported on the campaign trail.
While working Americans catch up, we're going to put a temporary cap on credit card interest rates at 10%.
Credit card companies say the 10% cap would be, quote, unworkable.
Of course they would. I already know these corporations, these people don't want the, I already know they're about to be upset about this. They probably going to try to, not let this bill go through.
They say it would actually harm the consumers that the policymakers are trying to help by limiting the types of credit that tens of millions depend on. That said, others suggest that maybe limiting credit might not be a bad idea, since we had at last report $1.16 trillion on our credit cards in America. Not surprisingly, people with the credit cards in their pockets think a cap is a good idea.
It is.
It's really, really easy to get into a financial hole, and it's hard to get out of it, especially with the interest rates that are like crazy, like 29%. It should be illegal.
The interest rates on credit cards are outrageous, given that the banks are giving out no interest to people. So I think it's a great idea.
People do need their credit cards probably for bills, and things are going up, and they have to probably use that to get by. So at least the 10% is a start.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says we paid over $100 billion in interest in 2022 on our credit cards.
100, man, that's a lot of money.
President Trump takes a lot of pushback on some of his ideas these days, but here's one that it seems pretty much everyone, except the financial institutions, can get behind. At Ocean County Mall in Toms River, New Jersey, I'm Jeff Flock with the Fox Business Network.
Man, just seeing that, and we're doing it to ourselves. $105 billion in interest. Now, the reason why I think they should put a cap on this is because of this right here.
Many of you already know this, but so many folks are drowning under the weight of credit card debt as the number of accounts with delinquent balances has more than doubled since 2021. A report from the Philadelphia Federal Reserve also shows a record high number of people are only paying the minimum monthly payment on their credit card bills. It's peaked at nearly 11% of all accounts in the third quarter of 2024. You see it on that graph. And this comes as a new survey from Bankrate found that over half of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $1,000 emergency expense. That's serious. Here to help break this all down is Ted Rossman. He's a senior industry analyst at Bankrate. Ted, I always add...
And I'm not here to judge nobody, all right? I understand life happens and things happen. But most importantly, like I said, we do it to ourselves. Like man, I believe that if we cap this is actually what help be able to, of course, pay down that debt, most importantly, but also put money into our savings account and be able to stack our money up. But most people are going to say, hey, don't get a credit card. I understand. But people just need it because of the economy. We're going to talk about that in a second.
Advocate for people I know to never make just the minimum payment. Help us understand what the risks are for consumers who only pay that to their credit card.
The typical minimum payment formula on a credit card is just 1% of the balance plus interest every month. That means it takes a really long time to pay this off. The average credit card balance is around $6,400, according to TransUnion. Well, if you make minimum payments at the average interest rate, which is around 20%, you're going to be in debt for 18 years and you're going to end up paying about $9,300 just in interest. So we really want to pay it off much more quickly than that.
And we know many folks avoid making the minimum balance, but life circumstances change. And I know that delinquent balances tend to worsen year over year. So do we expect this to increase, and why?
We're starting to see some flattening out of this trend. Delinquencies have jumped a lot in recent years. Some view this as normalization after the pandemic weirdness. Delinquencies and balances actually dropped a bit early in the pandemic because people used stimulus to pay off debt and they were spending less for a while. This is one of these all news is local kind of issues. And I don't mean just geographical, I mean more at the household level. About half of households carry credit card debt from month to month, and about half don't. There's a huge difference between someone who's using cards for rewards and convenience versus someone who's saddled with an average interest rate around 20%.
Ted Russman, great to chat with you, joining us from Pleasantville.
Now, I understand we're all grown, right? We all make choices, but I believe that's the reason why the government should put things in place so they actually don't take advantage of you, right? Now, let's see what Trump has to say on how he's going to, put things in place to better our economy so we can actually take advantage of this.
Well, we hear it every election cycle. Voters consistently list the economy as one of the top issues driving them to the polls. President-elect Donald Trump has already laid out some of his economic proposals, and that includes extending the 2017 tax cuts. He's also proposed lowering the corporate tax rate to as low as 15% and eliminating taxes on tips and overtime pay. Trump's suggested that those costs could be offset with tariffs on foreign imports. CBS News.
I think that will, of course, help eliminating taxes on tips and overtime pay because of putting more money back in your pocket, which you'll be able to then pay down this credit card debt, which will then, once you pay down the credit card debt, you'll be able to stack your money up and put it into your savings account. So
Contributor J.D. Durkin joins us now. J.D., I want this to be really specific and valuable to our viewers. So what could the Trump presidency actually mean for inflation, for the price of goods, particularly when we're talking about groceries, because we know that's a big issue?
And we certainly is, and we certainly know that the priority for the soon-to-be president is for tariffs, which economists do very honestly say these are taxes on imported foreign products that come to this country. So even though now President Trump is going to make a lot of promises and say that tariffs will help bring down the cost of goods and help raise wages, economists, especially in terms of food imports, they've still very much been arguing the opposite, Lana. They said there could be more short-term pain. That was actually something that even Elon Musk said before the election could be the case. I think the hope is that despite that short-term pain in terms of, pressure at the grocery store and pressure on oil and these other things that Americans spend money on, that in the long term, you could actually have a bit of that relief. But that's why we had those 23 Nobel laureates come out before the election and said, when we compare the economic plans between Harris and Trump, it's Harris's plan that would be better for federal deficits and better for inflation, especially for that short-term pressure.
So don't expect that your grocery prices are going to go down anytime soon, especially if you're buying avocados from any place other than California.
Listen, we've had this conversation for years. When is pricing going to drop back to the 2019 levels? It's unfortunately likely a thing of the past.
All right. Well, let's ask this question. What if you're looking to buy a home? Because we know that that's also been a concern for people. What's going to happen to mortgage rates?
It is going to take a while. I mean, if we go back to the last 20, 25 years, we had a 7% 30-year fixed rate mortgage all the way back in 2001. It wasn't until 2020 when we had that level effectively fall down to 3%. I looked at the number today. It's at 7.3%. So even as we have the central bank in good faith lowering short-term interest rates because overall inflation's gotten down to 2%, this is the most stubborn of those economic indicators to fall. So, unfortunately for individuals, you're probably looking at a very long time horizon before you have a lot of relief. But this is an opportunity, as you and I talked about earlier this week, to perhaps refinance. If you're committed to your situation, committed to the home that you're going to be in for quite some time, and you're trying to ease some of those pressure around the edges for those interest payments, that is a good opportunity to consider. But economists say if you're still, if you're pretty late rather into that mortgage agreement that you have, that's probably not the best opportunity to refinance.
All right. So grocery bills aren't going to come down. The cheap goods that you're buying on Amazon, if they're coming from a foreign country, are probably going to go up. You're not going to see any relief when it comes to the housing market anytime soon, but maybe middle-class Americans will have some relief when we're talking about the extension of those 2017 tax cuts.
And we look back at 2017, and there were a lot of working class Americans, and they were thrilled with the fact to say, started in February of 2018, after those Trump tax cuts passed, I did see that relief. Many people have argued, well, maybe the 2017 Trump tax cuts disproportionately affected or benefited the wealthiest Americans. But we also want to keep our eyes on that corporate tax rate overall, because that could help ease a lot of those pricing pressures on the goods and services that you and I are buying in the day-to-day economy. They used to be as high as 35%. Trump lowered them to 21%. He now wants to bring that corporate tax rate down to 15%. That could allow some of these major corporations that trade publicly to bring down some of their own prices and make key investments that could help relieve some of the burden. So good for individual take-home pay, not good if you're concerned with things like the national debt and our ballooning federal deficits year over year.
All right, J.D. Durkin, thank you.
Man, just to hear that. So it's going to take a little bit of time, of course, for the economy to get better. But tax cuts on certain things can also, like I said before, put money back into your pockets. And by putting money back into your pockets, you'll be able to pay down debt. But of course, we got to do what we need to do to take care of the things that we got to take care of. Now, one of the things that you need to take care of course, is your credit, right? The reason why I say take care of your credit is because it affects everything. The reason why it affects everything is because it affects the money coming in and affects the money going out. Because if your credit score is low, guess what? You're paying more interest. You're paying more if you got to put a down payment on certain things. So if you're having problems with your credit, I have multiple videos that are going to explain on how to fix your credit, right? And showing you the step-by-step procedure to remove things off of your credit score, your credit report, right? But most importantly, it's going to take time when it comes to fixing your credit. As you're fixing your credit, removing those negative items off of your report, and of course, paying that thing back. But most importantly, you have to be paying down that debt, right? Because 85% of your credit score is based off of your control. And the other 15% of your credit score is basically paying things on time, right? History. So if you want to take advantage of that, just watch this video right here where I break down on how to fix your credit step by step by step. So as you're fixing your credit, guess what? You have a better credit score. Now you're not, spending more money that you need to be spending on. All right. So go watch it.